Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Baha'i Faith,
Okay.
specifically their history, their administrative order, and this fascinating concept of the covenant.
Sounds good.
Now, you've brought some excerpts from the Ruhi Institute texts, which I know are pretty important in the Baha'i community, right?
Yes, these are study guides that are widely used within the Baha'i community.
Perfect. And I think these texts will be really helpful in understanding how this relatively young religion,
Right.
with its roots in mid-19th century Persia, how they navigated leadership changes and built this really
Yeah,
impressive global administrative order.
absolutely. The Baha'i Faith really offers a unique model of, religious leadership and governance.
Okay.
And these texts provide a practical look into how these concepts are actually applied.
So I think to kind of set the stage for our listener, let's imagine for a second.
Yeah.
The year is 1921. Abdu'l-Bahá, a central figure in the Baha'i Faith, son of the Prophet founder, has just passed away.
Hmm.
Now, in many religions, this would be a moment ripe for,
Right.
power struggles,
Yeah.
schisms. But in the Baha'i Faith, something really different happens.
Yes, and that's where the covenant comes in.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
The covenant, a key principle that was established by Bahá'u'lláh, the founder of the faith,
Okay.
was put in place to ensure a really smooth transition of leadership and avoid the kind of fragmentation that's plagued other religions in the past.
So it's like a safeguard?
Exactly. You can think of it almost like a spiritual will
Okay, that's really helpful.
that protects the unity of the faith.
So no chaotic scramble for power when Abdu'l-Bahá passed away?
Not at all, because Baha'u'lláh had already designated Abdu'l-Bahá as his successor during his lifetime.
Oh, wow.
And he also made it very clear that Abdu'l-Bahá was the authorized interpreter of his teachings.
So the line of succession was already pretty clear.
Yes, and Abdu'l-Bahá, through his own will and testament,
Okay.
appointed his grandson, Shoghi Effendi, as the guardian of the faith.
Okay, so Shoghi Effendi steps into this incredibly important role.
Yeah.
I mean, did he just kind of keep things running as they were, or was there a bigger vision at play here?
Well, Shoghi Effendi was definitely not just a caretaker.
Okay.
He really took on this monumental task of building a global administrative structure for the Baha'i Faith.
Wow, that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. It really is, if you think about it. Baha'u'lláh revealed these teachings, Abdu'l-Bahá spread them and clarified their meaning.
Yeah.
And then you have Shoghi Effendi coming in and building the actual system to put those teachings into practice and govern this rapidly expanding community.
So he's like the architect, putting everything together.
Exactly.
Now, when we talk about an administrative structure, I think people might imagine something like, I don't know,
Right.
popes and cardinals, this very hierarchical
Yeah.
kind of system. Was that the case in the Baha'i Faith?
Not at all. Shoghi Effendi actually put in place a system of elected councils, which we call spiritual assemblies,
Okay.
at the local, national, and ultimately international levels.
So it's kind of like a spiritual democracy.
It is. And these councils, these spiritual assemblies, are the ones who are responsible for guiding the affairs of the community.
That's fascinating. So you've got these elected councils, these spiritual assemblies.
Yes.
Tell me more about the elections themselves. Were they, I don't know, similar to what we see in the political world?
Well, you might be surprised to hear that they were actually very different.
Okay. How so?
For one thing, there was absolutely no campaigning allowed.
No campaigning. That's really interesting.
It is.
How do people even decide who to vote for?
Well, the focus is really on consultation, on reflection, on prayerful consideration.
Okay.
It's about choosing individuals who embody certain qualities,
Like what?
like trustworthiness, humility, a spirit of service to humanity.
That's a pretty beautiful concept.
It is.
Now, I have to imagine that with any big change, there's bound to be some resistance, even from within the community itself.
Of course, there were definitely challenges.
Hmm.
Shoghi Effendi actually faced opposition both from inside and outside the Baha'i community.
Oh, wow. Tell me more about that.
Well, even his own half-brother challenged his authority and tried to claim the leadership for himself.
Oh, wow. That's a lot to deal with.
It definitely was.
On top of, this massive task of building this global administrative order.
Yes, but Shoghi Effendi remained steadfast in his commitment to the covenant,
Okay.
and he faced these challenges with patience and wisdom, always remaining loyal to the teachings of Baha'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Bahá.
So in a way, these challenges just made the Baha'i Faith stronger.
Absolutely. And despite this opposition, Shoghi Effendi's leadership led to incredible growth for the Baha'i Faith.
Okay.
He launched these global initiatives, like the 10-Year Crusade, which led to a significant expansion of the Baha'i community worldwide.
Wow. So we've got Shoghi Effendi building the structure, overseeing this global expansion. But was he doing all of this by himself?
Not at all. One of the most significant things he did was to establish the International Baha'i Council.
Okay, now I think it might be helpful for our listeners if we define what the Universal House of Justice is before we go any further.
Okay, sure.
Because the International Baha'i Council was kind of like a precursor to that, right?
Exactly. The Universal House of Justice is the highest governing body in the Baha'i Faith.
Okay.
You can think of it almost like a global parliament.
Okay.
But instead of being driven by political agendas, it's guided by these spiritual principles.
Okay.
And it's responsible for applying the teachings of Baha'u'lláh to the issues facing the world today.
Got it. So Shoghi Effendi is working toward this long-term vision of establishing the Universal House of Justice.
Right.
But did he live to see that happen?
Sadly, he did not.
Okay.
He passed away in 1957 before the Universal House of Justice was elected.
So who stepped in? Was there another designated successor?
That's where it gets really interesting because there wasn't a designated successor in the same way.
Okay.
But Abdu'l-Bahá, in his will and testament, had already anticipated this situation. He established another institution called the Hands of the Cause of God.
Okay, what is that?
These were individuals who were appointed by Shoghi Effendi himself,
Okay.
and they were known for their deep understanding of the Baha'i teachings and their dedication to the faith.
Got it.
And Abdu'l-Bahā's will stipulated that if the guardian were to pass away without appointing a successor, the Hands of the Cause of God would step in to guide the community and oversee the election of the Universal House of Justice.
So they acted as a bridge.
Exactly.
And did they succeed?
Yes, remarkably. Just 6 years after Shoghi Effendi passed away, in 1963,
Okay.
the Hands of the Cause of God successfully oversaw the election of the first Universal House of Justice.
Wow, it's amazing how it all seems to fit together.
It really is. And this really speaks to the foresight of Baha'u'lláh in establishing the covenant and the dedication of his followers, especially Abdu'l-Bahá and Shoghi Effendi.
In making that vision a reality. Okay, so we've laid out this amazing foundation. We've talked about the covenant, how it led to the development of this global administrative order.
Right.
But I want to zoom in a bit for our listener who's already familiar with these basic concepts. What does all of this actually mean for the average Baha'i just living their life?
That's where we get into the heart of Baha'i practice, and that is the dual responsibilities that are entrusted to every single Baha'i.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are those dual responsibilities?
So every Baha'i, regardless of their role in the community, is tasked with both protecting the faith and propagating its teachings.
So it's not just about the institutions at the top.
Exactly. It's about the actions and choices of every individual Baha'i.
So it's both hand.
Yes. That's what makes the Baha'i Faith so unique.
Got it.
It really emphasizes individual initiative and action within this broader framework of the covenant and the administrative order.
But how does this all play out in our modern world?
That's a great question.
You know, with the internet, social media, all of these rapid changes happening around us.
It highlights the role of the Universal House of Justice.
Okay.
Because while they cannot change the core teachings that were revealed by Baha'u'lláh, they do have the authority to provide guidance on how those teachings can be applied to the issues of today.
So it's like the Universal House of Justice acts as a compass, guiding the community through the complexities of our modern world.
Exactly.
While still adhering to these timeless principles.
Yeah.
So, for example, would they offer guidance on, how to use the internet to share the Baha'i teachings, how to engage in these difficult conversations about social issues in a way that aligns with Baha'i principles?
Absolutely.
Like that.
Exactly. The Universal House of Justice plays a really important role in helping Baha'is around the world apply their faith to their everyday lives, even with all of these changes that are happening. And it's remarkable how this administrative order, which at first glance might seem rigid or hierarchical, actually empowers individuals to take action and contribute to building a better world.
Now, I'm wondering, what about individuals who maybe don't agree with the decisions made by the Universal House of Justice or by the spiritual assemblies?
Okay.
Is there room for dissent, disagreement within the Baha'i Faith?
That's a very important question.
Yeah.
And it really goes back to the essence of the covenant.
Okay.
Because while the Baha'i teachings emphasize obedience to the institutions of the faith, this is not about blind obedience.
Okay.
It comes from a deep understanding that these institutions are divinely guided and protected.
So it's not about silencing dissenting voices. It's about choosing to align yourself with a system that you believe is for the benefit of humanity.
Exactly. And the Baha'i teachings really encourage open consultation and the sharing of diverse perspectives during that decision-making process. But once a decision has been made, especially by the Universal House of Justice, obedience to that decision is essential for maintaining unity and integrity.
I see.
And it prevents fragmentation.
But I'm thinking back to those individuals that we talked about who actively opposed Shoghi Effendi's leadership. How does the Baha'i Faith deal with those who actually reject the covenant outright or challenge the authority of its institutions?
If that's where things get a bit more complex.
Okay.
Individuals who do that, who actively reject the covenant and the authority of the institutions, are considered covenant breakers.
Okay.
And this is treated very seriously within the Baha'i community.
So there are consequences.
There are consequences.
Both spiritual and administrative, I imagine.
Yes. The Baha'i writings are very clear that covenant breaking is a very serious matter.
And it can have serious implications.
Exactly.
Okay, so can you talk about those consequences a little bit more? Like, what actually happens to someone who is declared a covenant breaker?
Well, the first step is always to try to counsel and reconcile with the individual.
Okay.
The Baha'i institutions would reach out to them, try to understand their concerns, and guide them back to the principles of the covenant.
So it's about healing that division.
Exactly. The emphasis is always on reconciliation and unity. However, if the individual continues to reject the covenant, more formal steps might be taken.
Like what?
And this could ultimately lead to the individual being declared a covenant breaker.
Okay.
And shunned by the community.
Wow. Shunning is a pretty intense consequence.
It is, but it's important to understand that the goal isn't to punish the individual.
Okay.
It's about protecting the unity and integrity of the faith.
So it's more about containing something harmful than it is about punishing someone for their beliefs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Baha'i writings describe covenant breaking as a sort of spiritual illness that can spread and actually harm the community.
I see.
If it's not addressed.
So it's about protecting the community.
Exactly.
It's about upholding the covenant. It's about safeguarding the spiritual health of the community.
Yes.
Okay, this is fascinating. It's really this complex interplay between individual belief, institutional authority, and then this overarching principle of the covenant.
Yes.
Holding it all together.
It's a unifying force.
It's a unifying force, and it's enabled the Baha'i Faith to, face some of these challenging moments in its history.
Absolutely.
And emerge as this unified global community.
Yes.
Even while facing external pressures, internal disagreements, it's a testament to its strength and resilience.
It is a testament to the power of the covenant.
Now, I think this is probably a good point for us to pause and let our listeners absorb all of this information.
Okay.
But when we return, we're going to be taking an even deeper dive into the life and work of Shoghi Effendi, who we've been calling the architect of the Baha'i administrative order.
Sounds good. It's really quite something when you think about all this growth, all these structures, all happening during such a tumultuous period in world history.
I know. Wars, revolutions, technology changing at a dizzying pace.
Yeah, Shoghi Effendi's ministry spanned from 1921 to 1957. Talk about a time of massive shifts.
And yet, amidst all that, he manages to build and guide the Baha'i Faith.
It's incredible.
I mean, where do you even begin with a task like that?
Well, one of his first actions was to clarify a really important point. The relationship between the individual believer and the institutions of the faith.
Right, right. Those spiritual assemblies, our spiritual democracy.
Exactly. He emphasized that these institutions, although elected by the believers, actually derive their authority from Baha'u'llah's teachings themselves.
So it's not a free-for-all, everyone interpreting things their own way?
Right. There's a structure, a sense of authority.
Got it.
But it's not about blind obedience or like squashing individual thought.
Okay.
The Baha'i writings really stress consultation. People being able to express their views, participate in the decision-making.
So a balance. Individual expression, but respecting the decisions made for the good of the whole.
You got this beautiful dance between individual expression and collective responsibility, all within that framework of the covenant.
That's interesting.
And Shoghi Effendi, through his letters and guidance, he was always fine-tuning this balance.
You mentioned letters. Did he write a lot during his ministry?
Oh, tons. Yes. Thousands and thousands of letters going out from his office in Haifa to individuals and communities all over the world.
Wow, imagine that.
Yeah, offering guidance, advice, It's amazing, really.
A real treasure trove of insights into how to apply the Baha'i teachings to everyday life.
Absolutely, they're fascinating to read.
Were they mostly administrative, though? Or was there something more to them?
Oh, so much more. They were warm, encouraging. You can even feel his humor sometimes.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He'd call the believers his dearly loved co-workers. He'd share his own struggles, his triumphs,
Wow.
It really created this feeling of camaraderie, a sense of purpose, like they were all in this together.
It sounds like he was really conscious of that personal connection.
Absolutely. He was so involved in the lives of the believers, giving advice on everything from personal stuff like marriage, raising kids,
Wow.
to, more complex community issues like how to resolve conflicts, how to promote unity.
He really was shepherding this global flock, wasn't he?
You got it. And that personal touch, that was such a key part of his leadership style.
So much more than just an administrator.
Exactly. He wasn't just building a structure. He was nurturing a community.
Okay, so we've talked about his role in shaping that relationship between individual believers and institutions.
Right.
But what about his contributions to the actual structure of the administrative order?
Well, we already talked about how he established the local and national spiritual assemblies.
Right, the core governing councils.
Exactly. But he was also instrumental in developing a bunch of other institutions that are crucial to how the Baha'i community functions.
Such as?
Well, for instance, he established the Baha'i Fund.
Okay, now I've heard that term before, but never really understood what it meant.
The Baha'i Fund is the central financial institution of the faith.
Okay.
And it's entirely based on voluntary contributions from believers.
So no mandatory tithes or fees. It's totally voluntary.
That's right. It's about free will giving.
Wow.
Which I think really reflects this idea that material resources should be used to benefit humanity.
Not just hoarded or used for personal gain.
Exactly. It's pretty radical when you think about it.
It is, especially in today's world.
Right. And Shoghi Effendi, he always emphasized that the Baha'i Fund is a sacred trust, that its resources need to be used carefully, effectively, always with the aim of furthering the Baha'i teachings, making the world a better place.
It's all about service, contributing to the greater good.
Precisely.
Okay, so that's the Baha'i Fund. What else?
Another one he was really passionate about was the 19-day feast.
The 19-day feast. Now, I've got to admit, that name always conjures up images of like a huge banquet in my mind.
Well, it's definitely a time for fellowship, but it's more than just a party. It happens on the first day of every Baha'i month.
Okay.
And it's a special gathering for the community to come together, pray, connect, and consult on matters related to the community.
It sounds like a really beautiful way to start the month, reconnect with your spirituality, with each other.
Exactly. It's a time for reflection, for discussing how to serve the community, how to share the Baha'i teachings with others.
This brings us back to those dual responsibilities we talked about, protecting and propagating the faith.
Right. The 19-day feast really plays a big role in that.
Yeah, it's a built-in space for strengthening those bonds of unity, planning for future growth and outreach.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the Baha'i Fund, we've got the 19-day feast. Any others we should mention?
Yes, there's another really important one, Huqullah.
Huqullah. I'm definitely going to need you to break that one down.
It translates to the right of God.
Okay.
And it refers to this really unique system of financial contribution in the faith.
Oh.
It's based on the principle that some portion of your material possessions belongs to God.
Okay.
And you should offer it back as an act of gratitude.
So almost like a tithe, but without a fixed percentage.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Okay.
It's more of a voluntary offering, a way for Baha'is to express their thankfulness for their blessings and to help advance the faith.
It's very personal, very spiritual.
It is.
And how does it work, practically speaking?
Baha'is calculate it themselves based on their income, expenses, all very privately.
Interesting. So it's not about outward displays of giving.
Not at all.
More about acknowledging a higher purpose for your material possessions.
You got it.
It's a really refreshing perspective, especially in a world that often feels so materialistic.
Right. It's a powerful counter-narrative to that.
So we've got the Baha'i Fund, the 19-day feast, Huqullah, anything else?
One more I think is worth mentioning. Baha'i summer schools.
Summer schools? I don't know. The name doesn't exactly scream spiritual enlightenment to me.
Well, they're much more than just traditional academic settings.
Okay, tell me more.
Shoghi Effendi saw them as these dynamic centers for deepening your understanding of the Baha'i teachings.
Okay.
And also, crucially, training grounds for future teachers and administrators.
So like Baha'i leadership boot camps?
Well, maybe not boot camps exactly,
Okay.
but they were these spaces for intense immersion in the faith.
You study the writings, consult on community affairs, really hone your skills.
Right.
It's incredible how he recognized the importance of both the spiritual and the practical.
He understood that a dynamic faith needs more than just passionate believers.
Right.
You need people who are knowledgeable, skilled in leadership, who can apply Baha'i principles to real-world problems.
It's about cultivating a new generation to carry the faith forward.
Exactly.
When you look at all he accomplished, it's clear Shoghi Effendi was a visionary leader. He didn't just clarify the relationship between believers and institutions, he built this incredibly robust system.
Yeah, capable of supporting the faith's growth on a global scale.
And adaptable, right. As the faith grows, the system can evolve with it.
Exactly. That's part of his genius.
But of course, none of this was without its challenges.
Of course not.
We talked about the opposition he faced, both internal and external attempts to undermine his authority.
Yeah, the issue of covenant breaking.
Right.
That's something we'll explore in more depth in the final part of our deep dive.
You know, it's funny how even when you look at stories of, like, progress and achievement, there's often this undercurrent of challenge and resistance.
Absolutely.
Like, it makes you realize that even the most, beautiful and inspiring endeavors, they don't just unfold without some pushback.
Right, exactly.
And when we look at the Baha'i Faith, that resistance took on this really specific form.
Yeah.
Covenant breaking.
The covenant breaking, yeah.
Now, we talked about this a bit earlier, but for our listener, could you just remind us what covenant breaking actually means in the Baha'i context?
Sure. So you remember that the covenant is this central principle established by Bahá'u'lláh.
Right.
To safeguard the unity and integrity of the faith, it's all about accepting the designated line of succession.
Okay.
And upholding the authority of the institutions of the faith.
So it's not just a set of rules.
Right. It's more like a spiritual contract.
Okay.
That binds the entire Baha'i community together.
And breaking that contract is a pretty serious offense.
Yes. It's considered a very serious matter.
Yeah.
In fact, the Baha'i writings describe it as a type of spiritual disease.
Wow.
That can harm both the individual and the community.
So it's not just about disagreeing with a decision.
Right.
It's about rejecting these core principles.
Yeah, it's about rejecting the fundamental principles of the faith.
Okay. And I imagine Shoghi Effendi had to deal with this quite a bit.
He did?
As the guardian of the faith.
Yes. He had to grapple with individuals who were, challenging his authority.
Okay.
Spreading misinformation.
Right.
Even trying to create these splinter groups.
Wow.
It was a real test of his leadership.
Yeah, and his commitment to preserving the unity of the community.
Absolutely.
It's hard to imagine having to deal with that kind of opposition, especially when you're trying to build something new and guide a rapidly growing community.
Yeah, it was a huge challenge.
And I understand that a lot of that opposition actually came from within the Baha'i community itself.
That's right. And sadly, some of the most significant opposition came from people who had been very close to Baha'u'lláh or Abdu'l-Bahá.
Oh, wow.
Which made it even more painful and divisive.
So these were people who had been in the inner circle, so to speak.
Yes, very much so.
Could you give us an example? Like, who were some of these individuals and what did they do that was considered covenant breaking?
Well, one of the most well-known and perhaps one of the most painful cases was that of Mirza Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
The half-brother of Abdu'l-Bahá.
Oh, wow. A family feud.
It was. And sadly, he had opposed Abdu'l-Bahā's leadership even during Baha'u'llah's lifetime. After Baha'u'lláh passed away, he really actively worked to undermine Abdu'l-Bahā's authority.
So he tried to, take over.
In a sense, he did try to establish his own center of authority, completely separate from Abdu'l-Bahá.
Wow.
And he spread these accusations and tried to discredit Abdu'l-Bahá.
Trying to paint himself as the rightful successor.
Exactly.
It must have been so painful for Abdu'l-Bahá to experience that betrayal.
I can't imagine.
From his own brother, especially at a time when he was carrying so much responsibility.
Yeah, it was a very deep wound.
And it must have created a lot of confusion.
Oh, absolutely. It caused a lot of confusion and discord.
But from what I understand, Abdu'l-Bahá handled the situation with incredible grace and strength.
Yes, he really did. He was unwavering in his commitment to unity.
Okay.
And he constantly warned his followers about the dangers of listening to these divisive voices, these people who had broken the covenant.
So how did Shoghi Effendi, as the guardian, deal with this ongoing challenge of covenant breaking?
Well, he was very firm in his defense of the covenant.
Okay.
He wrote extensively about it, really outlining why it was such a serious matter.
So he was educating people.
Yes, and he also documented very meticulously the actions of these individuals.
So almost like a historian.
In a way, yes.
Making sure there was an accurate record of what happened.
Exactly, because he knew how important it was for the community to understand the dangers of division and the importance of unity.
Yeah, so it was about safeguarding the Baha'i teachings.
Absolutely. He wanted to ensure that the truth wasn't lost.
It's like he was creating a protective barrier around the community.
Yes, shielding them from those divisive influences.
And did it work?
Well, he encouraged the believers to stay grounded in the teachings of Bahá'u'lláh and Abdu'l-Bahá,
Right.
to avoid those who had broken the covenant, and to trust the institutions of the faith.
And he emphasized prayer.
Yes, and spiritual resilience.
So reminding everyone that the faith would ultimately prevail.
Exactly. He reassured them that God's covenant would ensure the triumph of the Baha'i Faith.
That's powerful.
It is.
And it must have been so inspiring to see his unwavering commitment
Oh, absolute.
to the covenant.
Yes, his steadfastness in the face of all that opposition.
It must have encouraged others to stay united and focused.
It did. It inspired countless Baha'is to keep working towards a better world.
It's incredible how he never lost sight of that bigger vision.
Mm-hmm.
He never wavered in his dedication to the task that was entrusted to him.
He was a remarkable example of principled leadership.
And what lessons can we learn from his example?
I think he shows us the power of staying true to your values.
Even when facing challenges.
Even when it's really difficult.
And the strength of unity.
Yes. When people come together with a shared purpose,
They can overcome anything.
they can accomplish incredible things.
And he also highlights the importance of historical accuracy.
Absolutely. Being aware of misinformation, distortion of the truth,
Especially today with so much information flying around.
it's more crucial than ever to be discerning.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm really struck by how the Baha'i Faith embodies these themes of unity and resilience.
And the power of belief.
Yes, it's a reminder that even in the face of immense challenges, hope and progress are possible.
It gives you a glimpse into a future where humanity is united,
Yes.
where justice and peace prevail.
A world where everyone's spiritual needs are valued.
Exactly.
And I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Baha'u'lláh, to Abdu'l-Bahá, and to Shoghi Effendi for their contributions to this vision.
Absolutely.
Their teachings continue to inspire millions of people,
Around the world.
offering a path toward a brighter and more hopeful future.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you today,
It has been a really fascinating journey.
exploring the Baha'i Faith and its history.
And for you, listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked your own curiosity, given you some things to ponder.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
Keep diving deep.
Until next time.